English Politics Podcast.
English Politics Podcast.
English Politics Podcast. Hello, and welcome to another insightful episode of the English Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Smith, and today we delve into a subject of crucial global significance: Iran's complex political landscape and its intricate relationship with the international community. We are extremely fortunate to have with us a guest whose experience and knowledge of global politics is unparalleled: the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. President Trump, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Always a pleasure to speak about such important topics.
Absolutely, and today's discussion is particularly timely. The relationship between the United States and Iran has seen many shifts, from the historic nuclear deal during the Obama administration to your administration's withdrawal and the subsequent maximum pressure campaign. Your approach to Iran is one of the most debated aspects of your presidency. So, today we're here to explore these shifts, the impact of your policies, and ultimately, what's happening on the ground in Iran today. We're not just talking about the government's actions, but also how the people of Iran are living through these monumental changes. President Trump, before we dive into the specifics of Iran's current situation, could you share your thoughts on how the global perception of Iran changed during your presidency?
Well, I've always believed in standing firm against adversaries. Under my administration, we adopted a very different approach than what had been taken in previous years. With Iran, the situation was clear. They had a history of destabilizing the region, sponsoring terrorism, and developing nuclear capabilities. Our maximum pressure strategy was designed to curb these activities and force Iran to the negotiating table. It wasn't about going to war. It was about using economic leverage to reshape the dynamics and put pressure on the Iranian government. But let me tell you, it's a tough challenge. Iran is a country with a deep history, and it's not going to change overnight, no matter what we do.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the heart of today's conversation. The topic we'll be exploring isn't just the politics, it's the lived reality of Iranians under these shifting geopolitical currents. So, let's dig deeper into Iran's current landscape and how both its leaders and its citizens navigate these challenges. With that in mind, let's dive into today's discussion and gain insight from President Trump himself about what's happening inside Iran today. You've had a front-row seat to the strategies and policies that shaped U.S. Iran relations, but we're also eager to understand the consequences of those policies from a ground-level perspective. And President Trump, we're keen to hear your take on how Iran is positioned on the global stage now. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's topic: inside Iran's reality. We'll break down the complexities, the challenges, and the hopes for the future, as seen through the lens of the past and present U.S.-Iran relationship. President Trump, it's an honor to have you here today, and I'm looking forward to an enlightening conversation. President Trump, let's begin with the first question. What do you think is the biggest misconception about Iran, both in the West and in the region?
There's a lot of misinformation about Iran, especially in the West. People tend to focus on the government and the nuclear issue, which is absolutely important, but they don't understand the broader implications of what's happening inside Iran. Iran is a country with a long history and a complex society. The people there are incredibly resilient and resourceful, but their lives are constantly affected by government policies that are often out of their control. What many in the West miss is that the government of Iran doesn't represent the will of the people entirely. There's a significant divide between the ruling elite and ordinary Iranians who want more freedom and opportunity. The West tends to see Iran only through the lens of its leaders, Ayatollah Khamenei and the Revolutionary Guard. But Iran is far more diverse than that. Many Iranians are caught between wanting to live in a modern, prosperous society and the repression they face from their own government. Economic hardship is widespread, and sanctions, while aimed at the government, have a huge impact on the everyday lives of ordinary citizens. That's a key point that people often overlook.
That's a critical perspective. especially when we consider the broader human element of a situation. Now, moving forward, let's discuss the impact of the U.S. withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal. What do you believe was the main objective behind this move, and how do you think it affected Iran's position on the global stage?
The main objective of withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal was to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power. Let's be clear about that. The deal was deeply flawed. It gave Iran billions of dollars in sanctions relief without ensuring any long-term guarantee that they wouldn't develop nuclear weapons. The Obama administration made a critical mistake by lifting sanctions without sufficient checks on Iran's nuclear program, and I wasn't going to stand by and allow that to continue. When I took office, I made it clear that the deal needed to be renegotiated or ended altogether. The Iranian regime has been known for its deception and its history of violating agreements. So, we pulled out of the deal and we imposed the maximum pressure campaign. This put Iran in a difficult position, economically and politically. They were no longer receiving the financial windfall they expected, and their economy was hit hard. As for their position on the global stage, it certainly became more isolated. The global community has largely aligned with the U.S. in recognizing that Iran poses a significant threat. It wasn't just a nuclear issue. It was their support of terrorism and destabilizing actions across the Middle East. By isolating them diplomatically and economically, we weakened their ability to project power and influence in the region.
It's clear that the strategy was designed to curb Iran's ambitions on multiple fronts. But Iran's response has been equally complex. What would you say is Iran's key strategy for countering U.S. policies and maintaining its influence, both domestically and internationally?
Iran's response has been one of defiance, and in many ways, it's worked for them internally. They've managed to rally nationalistic sentiment by portraying themselves as the victim of U.S. aggression. Domestically, the government uses anti-American rhetoric to solidify its power and distract from its own failures. They've also ramped up their military and proxy operations across the region, particularly in countries like Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, to maintain their influence. Internationally, Iran tries to exploit divisions between the U.S. and its allies. They're very good at using diplomacy to manipulate situations in their favor. They also have strong backing from Russia and China, which provides them with economic and political leverage. This gives Iran a certain level of security, even though they're under heavy sanctions. So, while the maximum pressure campaign hurt them, it hasn't completely destroyed their ability to remain a significant player in global politics.
The geopolitical balancing act Iran faces is certainly a difficult one. But there's a human cost to these policies. What do you think is the long-term impact of this ongoing pressure on the Iranian people, and what can the international community do to improve their situation?
The long-term impact on the Iranian people has been devastating. Economic hardship, restrictions on freedom, and the constant threat of repression have created a difficult reality for millions of Iranians. But here's the thing, the Iranian people have shown incredible resilience. Despite the regime's oppressive policies, they continue to push for reforms and better living conditions. The international community can support them in this fight by applying diplomatic pressure on the regime to respect human rights and allow more freedoms for their people. However, the most effective support comes from promoting regime change from within. The Iranian people are the ones who have the power to demand change. The international community can provide moral support and apply pressure through sanctions and diplomacy. But real change will come when the Iranian people stand up for themselves and demand their rights. It's important to remember that the Iranian people are not their government.
Comprehensive story. The price of resilience. The story begins in the bustling city of Tehran, where Layla, a young Iranian woman, finds herself navigating the challenges of a nation under immense pressure. Layla, a university student studying engineering, comes from a modest background. Her family, like many others, has faced economic hardship for years. Layla's father, once a successful business owner, now struggles to make ends meet as sanctions have caused businesses to collapse and prices to soar. Every morning, Layla joins the crowded metro, watching the faces of her fellow passengers, each etched with worry and fatigue. Yet, in their eyes, she also sees something powerful: resilience. Despite the uncertainty, people go about their lives, adapting to shortages, inflation, and the weight of political decisions made beyond their control. Layla's life changed forever the day her father had to close his shop. Once a bustling little electronics store, it had been their family's primary source of income. But with the sanctions, importing parts had become impossible, and the shop was forced to shut down. Layla watched her father grow quieter, the light fading from his eyes as his purpose slipped away. The economic toll was real, and it extended beyond just financial loss. It was a loss of dignity and self-worth for many Iranians. Determined not to let these challenges dictate her future, Layla became involved in an underground student group advocating for reforms. The group, while cautious, met in small numbers at a friend's apartment. They exchanged ideas, shared information from international news sources, and encouraged each other to dream of a freer, more hopeful Iran. The group wasn't interested in revolution, only in reform, better opportunities, a more open society, and respect for basic freedoms. One evening, as Layla sat with her friends, she shared her thoughts on the struggles her family faced, the frustration of feeling unseen by the world, and the desire for change. Her friend Amir, a law student, nodded solemnly. He knew Layla's story was not unique. It was the story of countless Iranians yearning for a chance to shape their own destinies. But advocating for change in Iran was dangerous. Security forces monitored young people closely, especially those perceived to be critical of the government. Layla and her friends knew the risks they faced, yet they continued their quiet gatherings, believing that even small actions could make a difference. They exchanged poems and stories of resilience, finding solace in their shared experiences. One evening, as the group discussed the impact of the latest sanctions, Amir raised a question that resonated with everyone. Why must ordinary people pay the price for political decisions? They had read about negotiations, deals made and broken, yet they saw little relief from their everyday struggles. Layla's mind drifted to her father, and she felt a surge of determination. She realized that, despite the hardships, she had a responsibility to make her voice heard, however small it might be. As the months passed, Layla's involvement grew. She wrote articles, distributed pamphlets, and spoke with neighbors, each small action carrying a larger message. Her family, aware of her activities, feared for her safety, but understood her resolve. "We all want a better life, Layla," her father told her one night, "but be careful, my daughter. Change takes time, and you must look after yourself." Then, one evening, a close friend of Layla's was arrested at a protest, and the gravity of the situation hit her fully. Fear gripped her, and she wondered if her own efforts would only bring hardship to her family. But when she visited her friend's family, she was struck by their courage. Instead of discouraging her, they asked her to continue fighting for the values they believed in. They had lost a son to political repression, but they had not lost hope. Layla continued, more cautiously but with greater conviction. She became a voice for others, one of many in Iran striving for change. And though her impact was small, it was part of a larger wave, a quiet revolution of resilience and unity among Iranians who refused to give up on a brighter future.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. We've covered a lot of ground, from the complex relationship between the U.S. and Iran to the profound impact of these policies on the lives of everyday Iranians. Thank you, President Trump, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jane. It's been a pleasure to discuss these important issues.
To our audience, we encourage you to stay informed and continue supporting the English Politics Podcast. Your engagement helps us bring critical issues like these to light. Until next time, this is Jane Smith signing off. Take care and stay informed.